Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, the Sewage and Water Board once boasted that it handles America's toughest drainage problem. Until this week, we never realized that the problem was made more difficult by cars hidden in the drainage canal. For eastern New Orleans, drainage is only one of many problems that is underscored this week in a series about the city's troubled area. We'll be looking at these stories as well as the life of former Governor Kathleen Blanco, as witnessed by a reporter who covered her extensively. Our Future Watch segment examines which ways the city's ferry system revival is going, and we will look at news coverage when the media are faced with a tragedy among one of their own. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Carice Jackman, reporter, WWL-TV Channel 4. Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter. And Tyler Bridges, reporter, The Times-Picayune New Orleans Advocate. We're going to go over to Errol first, and we heard this week about in our drainage canal are cars, and one car even spilled out Mardi Gras beads, which is like, well, yes, of course, our car would have Mardi Gras beads, but cars in our canal, which, I mean, we have a drainage problem as it is, you know, and I can't think of it, the things on the curbs, you know, the catch basins that we need to clear out, but in these huge culverts, we have cars.
Yeah, this is one of those life in the big city stories that you don't know whether to laugh or to cry. I mean, there is kind of a humorous element to it and kind of a pathetic element to it at the same time. But the Sewage and Water Board a few weeks ago decided, you know, maybe we should get some people to go in there and see what's in those culverts and those tunnels. And so they got all these apparatus and these cameras, and they sent people down there and they looked, and lo and behold, somebody discovered an automobile, and perhaps more than one automobile, which became a big story. And then immediately they had to sit down and say, well, how do you get an automobile out of a culvert? It's not something they do all the time, and so they put all the mods together.
How did you get it in there in the first place?
And how do we go this many years without knowing it's in there?
That car had a 2007.
Well, those are all questions that can be answered. We suspect that, the only thing I could think of is that there are sections of the canal that are open, and that sometime, it could have been 10 years ago, that for some reason somebody pushed a car in there, and then ultimately the water flow just brought it in there and they got stuck. We just don't know. From what I read, there's no evidence of foul play involved with it, but it could have been somebody stole a car and just decided to get rid of it. We don't know. But if you think of it being there for 10 years, and for all the times we've had flooding events, and especially in the mid-city area where you have an automobile or two, that's a problem. Well, when this first broke, it really looked bad for the Sewage and Water Board, and you see all these jokes on the internet. But the big advantage the Sewage and Water Board today has is that they're all new. It's a new administration, and nobody can reasonably blame them for this. In fact, today, Gamal Carbon, who's the executive director, was twittering about this, and he says, as I approach my 1-year anniversary, I am proud to say that we're tackling more issues, and we're gonna go after more of them. This is a direct reflection of our team's commitment to do things the right way, and points out to do things the right way is going to be costly, and we're going to all be in this together, which kind of suggests maybe a tax hike, or at least a tax hike appeal down the road.
Wait, maybe it's a plot. Maybe the Sewage and Water Board put the car in there.
But I think they handled it well from a propaganda angle, because this wasn't one of these things that they just pulled out at midnight that they had yesterday. They had a lot of press there, and they had these great pictures of the crane pulling the car up. And so I think, perhaps correctly, is using this as a sign to say, look, you know, the old days are over, and then we're starting all over. But who would have thought? There's been so much attention given to the catch basins as being a problem, but who would have thought of an automobile, much less one loaded with carnival beads?
Yeah, with Mardi Gras beads in there. I mean, well, catch basins, then of course we've had the problems with the pumps and the turbines and the power for the pumps. And the culvert that we're talking about runs under Jeff Davis,
right,
if you're wondering about the area, and there's a real big pipe that's supposed to flow the water through. So now, I guess, on their to-do list is go into the culverts and check for cars now too? That's
what they're doing, yeah, they continue doing that. Again, as he reflects, I don't know if they can do, there's like 90 miles of canal out there, and doing that is really, really costly.
But it begs the question, shouldn't that have been part of the protocol of what's being done the whole time? We clean catch basins, we check culverts, we have this drainage system, it should be checked and monitored to make sure it's working.
Yeah, even though cleaning a catch basin is a lot easier than cleaning a culvert, you gotta send divers under there, and it's really hazardous and nasty down there, and so that really makes it expensive to do it.
But that's all part of a drainage system. I mean,
Exactly.
we want the
Right.
drainage
We
system
want to know it's working.
to, to have the water be able to flow through it, and the cars might prevent it. Well, at least now they've discovered it, and they know it's an issue, and hopefully they'll be addressing it
As he
regularly.
points out, at least we've discovered the problem.
Yeah.
And now we know we're going to deal with it.
And it's more evidence that the Sewage and Water Board under Mitch Landrieu was not maybe so effectively run.
Well, it wasn't just Mitch; it was the administrations before, because I think this current the Sewage and Water Board director said that it had been years, years and years, where there had been no investigation of the culverts. So, so hopefully
One
they will
would
do
think
it
right
now.
after Katrina, someone should have said, let's check and see what got in there during this big storm.
You would think so. Well, Dawn, we should have had you there. Okay,
Now
we're
we
going to
get
go
to
over
pay
now.
for it.
We're going to go to Tyler right now. And we lost our former governor, Kathleen Blanco, who had been ill for a while with a rare form of cancer. And she was just so brave through it all. She was a strong, brave, beautiful, good woman who faced challenges and criticism, too. You, over the years, really, you covered her a lot. You got to know her. And you have some stories to share.
Yeah, the last time that I had a really long conversation was in December of 2017, and I sat down with her and had the opportunity to tell the story of her having the ocular melanoma, and then she said then it was a terminal illness, and I thought she'd be alive for another 6 months, and instead she lived 6 months plus 1 year, and during that time she showed tremendous courage. John Bell Edwards told a story on Thursday at the Interfaith service in Baton Rouge that he visited her about 2 weeks ago, and he recently had a ceremony in Lafayette where they named a highway after her, and he walked into the room a couple weeks ago, and when he did, she wasn't well, and she opened her eyes and said, "Are you naming another highway after me?" and the last time I talked to Kathleen, she called me about 3 months ago, and she said, "Hey, Tyler, I've been killed on the internet. Could you do something about that?" I've never been killed on the internet before, and someone put out a false Facebook posting that she had died. So,
Which was, of course, not the case.
Yeah.
She did pass away last weekend, right?
yeah, on Sunday.
And yesterday there was a memorial for her, was that?
There was an interfaith service at the cathedral in downtown Baton Rouge. Very interesting. I was thinking to myself, this is not Donald Trump's America. Kathleen Blanco's America is very different. There was a rabbi, someone read from the Koran. They had a Lutheran minister, Episcopalian, and Archbishop Ayman was there. Really interesting group. Gail Benson gave a reading. And then afterwards, there was a public visitation while the former governor was lying in state there in Memorial Hall in the Capitol.
Of course, she was a wife and mother first. She had how many children? Was it
Six children.
And she did lose one tragically. So she first was in education, and then she decided to go into politics and public service. And she held a couple of different positions before getting to the governor's seat.
Right, yeah, she was a state representative, she was public service commissioner, lieutenant governor twice, and then in 2003 she was elected as the state's first female governor. And she was just a real person. You'd start talking to her and you'd forget that she was governor. Anybody who met her, I think, was touched by her.
And she was really, go ahead, Errol, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, politically, it's very rare for lieutenant governors to be elected governor. You'd think that'd be a natural stepping stone, but I think what happens once you get elected lieutenant governor, you're associated with whatever problems there are in the state, even though they're not yours. But what I want to ask you about is, during her first term, most of her first term, she was popular. She was certainly an education governor, and I think her heart was in the right place. But what happened in Katrina that ultimately made her decide not to run for re-election?
Sure. So for the first 18 months of her term, she was a popular, can-do governor. Business liked her. She cut taxes. She wanted more drilling of oil. Conservatives liked the fact that she was pro-guns, pro-life. And liberals liked her because she put an emphasis on helping the dispossessed and improving education. And then on April 29, 2005, Katrina hit.
August.
I said August. Oh, sorry.
August.
August.
We know. Yeah.
So there was the impression that she seemed overwhelmed, that this was too big for her. And probably it was too big for anybody. But she, she didn't have enough sleep. She seemed emotional at a time when that you're not supposed to appear that way. And her popularity rating just went through the floor at that point.
And she also, I think she expressed to you and I guess to others as well, that she kind of felt that she was sort of being scapegoated in a way.
Well, she absolutely felt she was scapegoated, that by the Bush administration, particularly Karl Rove. Remember that President Bush that was really a bad moment for him. That hurt him politically, and they wanted someone else to deflect the blame to, and they chose her. That was something she really, really strongly believed. But interestingly enough, I saw Kathleen Blanco for the 10th anniversary in August of 2015, and President Bush was at that ceremony at Warren Easton High School in New Orleans. And she spoke to me actually that she made a separation between President Bush with the rescue and President Bush with the recovery, and that she credited him with bringing billions and billions of dollars to help New Orleans get back on its feet.
Of course, she started the road home, and that was criticized, but it did help a lot of people too. But she also made sure that the Saints stayed here in New Orleans, and she made sure that the dome was renovated, which some people really didn't agree with.
That's one of the nice things, is that there's been a reassessment of her public record. When she left office, she couldn't run because she was so unpopular, going back to your question, Errol. So she wasn't able to have the second term that she wished she'd have. But one of the tough decisions she made right after Katrina was to rebuild the dome. She thought that would be an important symbol of the rebuilding of New Orleans. And remember, the Saints had went away to San Antonio that year, and they were able to get the dome refinished in time. And remember that first game against Atlanta. Sorry, she's an Atlanta fan.
Ouch.
Anyway, and that Steve Gleason block punt, that would not have been possible but for a politically tough decision at a time when New Orleans didn't look like it had a very good future. Why should you be spending money on the Superdome? Well, in the long term, that turned out to be a great decision by Governor Blanco.
An economic basis decision, and for it, she is now in the Saints Hall of Fame.
Yes, and I think that's one of the reasons, right, and that's perhaps one of the reasons why Gail Benson was at the Interfaith Service yesterday doing a reading. And also, Governor Blanco deserves credit for another tough political decision. She went against her political base to have the state take over New Orleans' failing schools, dysfunctional schools. And the New Orleans schools are much better than before.
The whole recovery school
district. Yeah. We now have one assessor in New Orleans rather than 7. That happened on her watch as well.
So a lot was accomplished by her in her one term, after having faced enormous challenge with a very devastating hurricane. Kathleen Blanco.
Yeah, 76 years old.
Good woman, and may she rest in peace, and our condolences certainly to her family. Carice, over to you right now. You've done a really, really nice series on the East. And talking of Katrina, pockets of the city have had to recover, and the East has had a hard time doing that. And you sort of go into that. All I do is twirl that around. So I really don't need it.
I had the phone ring on me earlier, so I'm trying to make up for it.
But anyway, 4-part series, right? The last part is airing tonight. Taking a look at blight, at crime, at the youth who live in that area. So what did you find out?
Well, just, talking to people and just hearing some of their concerns, like really listening to their concerns, because, a lot of times we would hear from people, look, all we see on the news is about crime in the East, and there are pockets of crime. It's not necessarily all of New Orleans East, because New Orleans East is so big.
In fact, last night there was a double murder.
Absolutely, absolutely. There was a double murder off of Chef. And so many people keep saying, we really want you to go in depth with some of the issues that we're facing. Crime, of course, being one of them, but looking at blight, looking at how the youth feel like they don't have a lot of opportunities. So we sat down, and I actually sat down with a lot of people at WWL, because a lot of people at WWL either lived in the East or still do live in the East. So I went down and I just said, okay, let's talk about some of these issues that we're facing. And I like that we started off talking to a man named Ronald Walker, and he's a guy who lives in the East. He's been there since 1982, and we just drove around with him. to, he lives in Lake Carmel, and then we drove to Kingswood, and then we just went around to Bullard, and we just talked about some of the things that he's seeing. And he said that, one thing that he feels that is lacking is police presence. In his eyes, he says they're doing the best they can, but we're not seeing enough of them. And so, we took a look at the data in terms of crime trends, and we found that, in fact, crime is down in the East from last year, at least for the year to date, but property crimes are up. So violent crimes are down, but property crimes are up. So when people talk about car burglaries and, and things like that, we are seeing a spike in that.
And we're not seeing as many businesses as there had been before the storm, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Everyone tells us, you talk to anyone, and they remember the old plaza, they remember the having something to do, the skating rink. They have so many memories. The theater, which just recently got demolished back in May. And so there's so many things that there's just lacking opportunities, lacking businesses, and they want to see that come back. And so that's what they keep telling us. They have to either drive to Slidell or Chalmette to go get a really good bite to eat from a major chain. So we highlight some of that, and we highlight just what it looks like there versus some of the neighboring towns.
Prior to the storm, New Orleans East was facing some challenges with crime, but it was a thriving community. And also it was an area of the city, I believe, with the highest rate of African-American home ownership. It was just a real vibrant section of our community, and it is sad to see that it hasn't come back all the way. But there was that fear. Did people talk about it? That it wouldn't. There was the fear that if resettlement wasn't in some way more controlled, that there would be that quote, jack-o'-lantern effect, and that's kind of what we have seen.
And sadly it has. We have that effect where it's like, the people are starting to move there, especially a lot of people who feel like they cannot afford to live some areas of downtown now. They are being pushed over to the east, but there's no opportunity out there for them, I spoke with one lady who is a realtor and investor, and she's going to air in our series tonight, and she says, look, the supply is there. I mean, the demand is there, but there's no supply. There's nothing for them there's nowhere to spend their money.
It's not an economic engine. For many years, the whole Michoud facility was a real key to it. And Michoud brought great hopes for the future. Even after it closed, that certainly some kind of manufacturing plant would come and it would be a place for jobs. It has just never really happened. I mean, there's a scaled back effort in terms of what's going on there. And things like, put up jazz land, that, maybe that would draw people into the area. That failed. Well, there was hope with Six Flags. Six Flags couldn't make it work. And so there's not the thing that's really bringing money into the area. When that happens, you lose everything else.
Absolutely, and that's why they always tell us, and we named it the Forgotten East, because people still feel forgotten, especially a lot of the minorities that live out there. A lot of the the Black and the Vietnamese community just don't feel like their voices are being heard. So my hope is that this shines a light on it, and that we continue to shine a light on it to help the people in the East and just help them feel rejuvenated again.
Because people are living there. I mean, some of the stats that you show in your report, I mean, prior to the storm, I believe it was over 90,000. Now it's just about 75,000. Those are 74,000 of our neighbors who live in New Orleans East, who certainly could use more amenities. And the police are certainly, we know that they're shorthanded as it is, and it's hard to cover. And that was the fear also of that big expanse of land out there in the 7th District, that there just would not be enough personnel to patrol it all.
Absolutely.
Well, the other thing is that there's a real geographic divide. For most people, it's a long ride to get to the east. If you live wherever you live in the area, and the I-10 high-rise to me is a psychological it's a psychological barrier. And like where Michoud is would be a great place for an industrial park, but like look at Elmwood by comparison, which is in Metairie. Elmwood, you can be on Carrollton Avenue and take the Earhart Expressway in a matter of moments. You're in Elmwood. Okay.
But Michoud, you could be in Mississippi in 30 minutes too. You could be all.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. The East has so much land and so much opportunity. It's just getting it there is the big issue right now. And how do we do that?
Okay, well, it's really a very nicely done series. Wonderful to have you here, Carice, but it's kind of bittersweet because you're leaving us next week.
I know. I'm headed to Nashville. The last day is the 29th, and but it's been a blessing just being here in New Orleans, and of the food, the people, everybody has been amazing, and just covering the stories that matter like this.
And
Great news,
New Orleans will always be a part of you.
Yes, it will. It will.
It's hard to lose. All right, Carice, thanks a lot. Dawn, we're going over to you. Our ferries, what's the latest on the ferries?
We're going to talk about the Ferry Terminal, and that terminal building at Canal Street has, for decades, really been a dividing line between where the aquarium is and where Spanish Plaza is. And you're cut off. If you want to enjoy walking along the river, you pretty much have to go through a cat-infested little alleyway to get around from one side to the other. That's all supposed to change. I have some renderings to show. New designs that are about 60% of the way finished for reimagining the Canal Street Ferry Terminal. What happened is a year and a half ago, this project was bid out. The plans came in well over budget. So there's a new design team. There's a new theory in design. It's called CMAR, which is Construction Management at Risk.
So what we're seeing is the new design?
What we're seeing is the new design. You can see the aquarium behind. The river would be off to your right in this picture. You're able to access the river. You're accessing Spanish Plaza. There you go. There's where the construction is going to be for the Four Seasons and the former World Trade Center building. Much more user-friendly, both for ferry riders as well as just the pedestrian public, tourist public on that part of the river. So now they're working on this CMAR plan, Construction Management at Risk, which means they work directly hand in hand with the contractor, helping them make the design. If they're able to agree on a maximum price of this design that falls within their budget, they don't have to do any more review. They can immediately start construction. This 60% design phase should be finished to 100% the end of October or early November. Construction could conceivably start, if all goes well then, in December. And then it would take about 2 years for the new ferry terminal to come online. The whole time there will be a temporary docking station. The ferry service will never shut down. But it's a big project because it's not just the ferry terminal. There's the commercial construction, there's marine construction, and then there's new rail installation to get the streetcar tracks and the freight train tracks to the correct side of the ferry terminal. So no small task. It is funded primarily by the Federal Transit Authority. They have a September 2022 deadline for the money to be spent to actually have the money to do this project. We'll see. We should know by the end of October, early November, if they've been able to get a design that meets the budget and then can move forward. If the design under this plan does not meet the budget, then they'll have to put it out for bid and see if there's a contractor who could do it for that budget.
Which would mean more delays.
Which would mean more delays and probably more costly. In the meantime, ridership on the ferry last year was 1,054,000 people using it. It's not something that does not get used in our city. People use it to commute from the...
Interesting you say that because I started my career in Mississippi and I would always come down to New Orleans to have some fun, and I would bring my mom, and every time my mom came...
Wait. You'd come to New Orleans for fun and you bring your mom?
Yeah. Well, I would warn her about bourbon and everything like that. But we would come down and she would always, something she's always fond of is getting on the ferry because you see that beautiful
you get great views and
the
it's
city.
cheap. It's
cheap.
fun entertainment. There's another story going along, sort of, but different from the ferry terminal, and that is that there are 2 brand new ferries that were delivered to the RTA last year, 2018, that still don't have certificates of inspection and can't pass them. They were given certificates of inspection to be released by the boat contractor to the RTA. This published reports, I could not get anybody to talk to me about this. Published reports say it's more a matter of drills and safety that are the holdup here. It's not actually the boat design itself. It's the systematic plan for when they're operating. I could get no comment from the RTA on that at all. Meanwhile, there are 2 brand new, beautiful vessels that could be ready to go, and they're not.
Okay. All right, Don. Thank you very much. Okay, Errol, we're going to go over to you right now. And of course, this week has just been such a sad week for so many of us here in the city with the loss of WVUE anchor Nancy Parker in a tragic plane crash, and then, of course, the pilot in the crash as well.
Yeah,
who you knew.
The personal disclosure, I knew both of them. I knew Franklin Augusto, too, who was the pilot. We're talking about Nancy Parker now, but I just want to mention the last time I saw Franklin was July 2nd, and it was at a party to commemorate Amelia Earhart, these people who were aviation buffs, and it was in July 2nd, 1937 that she was officially lost, and so here was a party commemorating the passing of an aviator, a minority aviator at that, and I talked to Franklin, and of course one of his big projects was to try to get more coverage of the Tuskegee Airmen, and so he was talking about that. But the thing about Nancy Parker, what was really just I mean, we all know the emotional and the gut-wrenching aspects of it. But to watch what happened last Friday in terms of the press coverage, because here you had a situation where a newsroom knew that there'd been a tragedy with one of their own. They had to report it, but they couldn't talk about the tragedy yet because of the protocol, because the protocol is
hadn't
always...
been notified.
Yeah, is that you don't report until the family is notified. And so they had to wait until they had some kind of official notification, even though they were reporting that there was an accident. And I thought that
And reporting that two people had been killed and they could not.
Yeah, and Mike Scott of The Advocate did an article about this too. But from some of the things I watched last Saturday, they did last Friday, I thought one very heroic moment with reporting is they did a remote from near the site with veteran Rob Messon. And Rob Messon was doing the reporting and telling what happened. But you can tell he knew what was happening too. Hell, he knew the full story. And if you knew, like we did, what had happened, it was just amazing what he did. But you can tell he was really hurting
His
inside.
professionalism in handling it on the air was
Utmost professionalism, and of course the other local stations did not reveal the identity either until Fox 8 did. However, some places on the internet did, which is just really so cool to the family to do something like that. But the Fox 8 news team really did such a professional yeoman's
And the
job.
other stations showed respect too, and then fell in line. So it was a situation unlike any that you've ever seen.
So our condolences to the Parker Boyd family, and of course to Franklin Augustus, and then of course we lost a fishing charter seaplane operator, Tofiel Bourgeois, too, this weekend. It was just
a hard
tragic,
weekend.
hard weekend. Okay, looking ahead.
Okay, this will be the last week ever, actually, to see the baby cakes. They're coming in for their final schedule. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and Thursday, they're playing Memphis, and then they finish off the season in Oklahoma City. After that, the franchise moves to Wichita, and there's a good chance this is the last time we're going to see minor league baseball in New Orleans.
That would be
They
a
say we might get a franchise back, but it's definitely the last for the franchise.
Well, we'll have to bring our little leaguers in to play because, I mean, they're going to the World Series.
Exactly.
Carice.
Forgotten East airs tonight. It's the final part of the series. It's called The Future of the East, and just talking to people. And also, just if you wanted to look online, we have all 4 parts too there.
Great. Don.
If you live, work, or travel downtown, this is just a traffic alert. The Convention Center Boulevard between Julia and Calliope will be shut down starting Monday all the way through Sunday of Labor Day weekend
Good
while
news to
they
have.
do the Convention Center
Okay.
upgrades.
Tyler.
Yeah, we're starting to get to the home stretch of the elections for which the primary is October 12th. The headline race, of course, is the governor, but also legislative races, all sorts of races going on. And I'm a big believer in that people get the government they deserve.
So go vote is what you're
Well,
saying.
get
Okay.
educated first and then go vote.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot for being here. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.